Mary, I think it's time to get started. Can you go ahead and open us up? Thanks. We can't hear any of the sound. So you have to unmic to or unmute to share your audio.
Okay, we'll just get started. Okay, welcome everyone. We were just giving folks a few minutes. And second. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I think we're just gonna do the speaker view here so that we can highlight the speaker. 1 second. Okay. All right, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today's event is titled Putting the Heart into Art, Excavating Arts-Based Research Methods in Critical Feminisms and Social Work Scholarship and Practice. I welcome you on behalf of Affilia's Feminist Inquiry and Social Work's editorial board. Today's event is part of our Critical Roundtable webinar series. I am Mary Diaz. I'm one of the members of the editorial leadership team, along with Dr. Sharvari Karandikar and Dr. Meg Gibson. I'm also a faculty member at the New York City College of Technology of the City University of New York, which is co-sponsoring today's event along with the University of Denver Graduate School of Social Work. I'm speaking to you from Manta, Ecuador, originally the land of Damanteños, Huancalvicas, and Punahues. Some useful information before we proceed. Today's conversation is being recorded. You will be able to access this and all our previous webinar recordings on Affilia's YouTube channel, which we'll share in a little bit in the chat feature. We'll share the link. The chat feature is disabled, however, for all of the attendees. But we'll be using the chat feature to share some links in terms of the YouTube channel and also the publications that our panelists will be highlighting in today's discussion. You can also see the live transcription by clicking more, and then you can also see the display of the show, the subtitles for today's discussion. We will be sharing Affilia's current monthly issue. Our link will be provided in the chat feature as well. I want to highlight today's conversation. Today's conversation will focus on the use of arts-based research and critical feminism in social work. This is dynamic work. Our panelists will unearth some of the different ways this work takes shape and the ways it can represent resistance, but also build collaboration and hope in academia, in our communities, and in our current global political context. At a time when the global hegemonic impulses center capital over life, exploitation over preservation, punishment over nourishment, dominance over building community and relationships, the arts can provide an opportunity to resist and break through these dominant influences, giving way to a more collective sense of sustaining life and sustaining one another. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator today who will take us into this deep and enriching discussion. Dr. Ramona Beltran, who is an associate professor and interim associate dean of research and faculty development at the University of Denver Graduate School of Social Work. She is a member of Affilia's editorial board and is the associate editor of a renewed poetry and creative work section. She is a member of Affilia's editorial board and is the associate editor and is in her scholarship amplifies global initiatives and in historical trauma and healing and storytelling methodologies that have been cited by researchers and practitioners alike. Her contributions have been invited by distinguished institutions, including the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Northwestern University, and Harvard University, as well as prominent cultural institutions, including the Denver Arts Museum, History Colorado, and the Latino Cultures Art Center. Dr. Beltran is a loving mother of 3 and is a multiracial Chicana of indigenous Mexican descent. She acknowledges that all of the earth has an indigenous name and a community meant to steward it. Welcome, Dr. Beltran.
Thank you, Dr. Diaz. Hello, everyone. Good day, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are joining us from. I'm thrilled to be hosting this incredible panel. And I'm very thrilled to announce the revitalization of our poetry and creative works publications in a time where this may not be welcome in many areas. I'm so thrilled to host three phenomenal scholars who integrate and embody art in their research and in their practice. Um, I want to speak just a little bit about how we got here. In December, I was invited to attend the first inaugural healing summit for the federal Indian boarding schools at the National Institutes of Health. And while I was there, I was so moved by listening to survivors, descendants, and researchers and scholars and community members who work to heal the wounds left behind by the boarding school legacy. But one thing that kept coming up over and over again was the importance of storytelling and truth telling and the role of art in telling those stories, but also as a healing intervention. So sometimes poetry, art, visual art, those are ways to tell the stories in a more nuanced way. Perhaps they tell a story that we can't say out loud. Um, it gives opportunities for nuance and interpretation. And what I love about these methodologies is that rather than imposing meaning, they are an invitation into meaning making together. So I wrote a little bit about this in the editorial, which is coming out or has recently been published, announcing this revitalization. Um, but I want to share just a little bit of what I wrote here, because the other night I was actually at this citywide art exhibition from Denver Public Schools. That's where I'm at right now. And I heard people talking about just the power of art in helping develop critical thinking skills, in ability to convey deeper meanings, in a way to like imagine possibilities, you know, even for elementary kids, children, like this is something we all have in common across generations. So here's what I wrote. Art is the language of the heart. Art through poetry and creative expression is a signal to others. It's proof that we're not alone as our narratives meet and join others with similar experiences. It is documentation of resistance and the persistence of humanity to build toward a reimagined future. It is a counter narrative, the leading edge of theory. Artists, creators, and social movements have always used their creative forms to convey deeper, more nuanced truths, to organize, to inspire, and to soothe the wounds of the collective. One of the things that we talked about as we were imagining how we would pull this together is how the last decade has created a deep sense of isolation with the predominance of social media and smartphones and constant access, that these sometimes become technologies of exclusion. We've witnessed the discourse of art and artists and creativity shift a little bit toward content and content creation, which implies a type of consumer consumption fueled by neo-colonial hyper-capitalism and focused on individualism. And that's not to say that these technologies can't be used for good too. We absolutely know that these can be harnessed for collectivity and mobilization and mutual aid. We know they can be used for good. But our hope here is to acknowledge this shift in connection and collectivism toward hyperconnectivity, but disconnection and individualism as one source of our current political strife. Conversely, we hope here to offer a hope story. We hope to offer critical feminisms as antidote and arts-based research as both method of inquiry and intervention for healing the wounds of this division. So really quickly, I'm going to read the bios of our esteemed panelists who I'm thrilled to know. And I will start with Dr. Antonia Alvarez. Dr. Alvarez is a queer Filipinx American scholar mama and an assistant professor at the Portland State University School of Social Work. Through the lenses of historical trauma, critical feminisms, and queerness, Antonia is committed to liberatory research and community engaged practice with LGBTQI, Two-Spirit Mahu communities of color. Using arts and culture-based interventions, her work explores health disparities and inequities and seeks solutions rooted in community well-being. Antonia received her PhD from the Graduate School of Social Work at University of Denver, here in our little space of the world, MSW from the University of Michigan School of Social Work, and is a licensed social worker in Hawaii. Next, we have Dr. Darren Cosgrove, who's a social work professor and researcher who focuses on queer and gender-affirming practice, critical and transformative social work, and arts-based participatory action research. Formerly a faculty member at Miami University in Ohio, Dr. Cosgrove has recently joined the social work program at Marist University in New York. At Marist, Dr. Cosgrove has used both arts-based and participatory action methodologies when working in partnership with transgender and non-binary communities to explore identity development, affirmation, and social stigma. Dr. Cosgrove teaches social work and sociology courses through an anti-oppressive and socially transformative lens. And then finally, we have Dr. Annie Zine Dunbar, who is a 1.5 generation newcomer whose ancestry traverses the Atlantic Ocean in Liberia and the United States. Zine is a scholar, artist, educator, social worker, and do-it-yourself, do-it-together practitioner. Zine's research and artistic practice foreground Black feminist traditions and epistemes to examine the interstitial experiences of displaced peoples. Her research interests include racialization and identity, organizational theory, mutual aid and community care, and long-term newcomer belonging. Zine's current artistic practice is focused on DIY collage and excavating the nature of hauntings within lineages across space, place, and in the land. So good, right? So good. So I'm going to start really quickly by asking one of our hosts to show our whiteboard that we have prepared for you. We're going to do a little bit of an interactive activity if we can. We're sort of experimenting with this. So Mary, are you able to open the whiteboard for folks? Or Sam?
I think Mary needs to open it and then I can move it around.
Mary, can you open up the whiteboard, please?
Okay, let's
Thank
see.
So I asked all of our scholars to share with us an piece of art, artist, exhibit, or experience that moved them. And once we get that pulled up, I'll ask them each to just really quickly describe what they put on the whiteboard. And I don't see what we created earlier.
Hold on, existing whiteboards.
Here it is. Okay. So let's start with you, Antonia.
Okay, so what I shared is on the bottom left. Okay, let me ground myself. Okay, here's my story. It was my advanced practicum year in my MSW program, and I was sitting on the floor in Midtown in Detroit, supporting a youth arts organization with an evaluation. And the rehearsal space was filled with all these teenagers, and they were talking and singing and laughing and all kinds of stuff. And then all of a sudden, they were called to attention, and somebody, I mean, I guess it was the director, started welcoming in them to sing this song. That was A Change Is Gonna Come, and it was by Sam Cooke, and that moment like rattled something in my soul. And then a month ago I saw this performance by Charles Yang at in the Dallas Symphony, playing and singing this song. I'm just going to play it for 2 seconds for people to hear it, but I was transported back to that exact moment with the Mosaic Youth Theater in Detroit, and it was just absolutely phenomenal. So I'm going to see if I can just play it really quickly. No, I can't. I don't know if it's clickable for you, Sam.
I think Mary has control right now. So let's
All right.
see.
Hold on.
Mary,
let's
if you
see.
move to the whiteboard tab that says Mary Diaz's whiteboard, are you able to see it and press the video?
Okay, 1 second. Let's see. I am unable to see it as well. So hold on 1 second.
It's
Um,
okay if we can't hear it. What if I just play it from here and you can listen? Can I do that real quick?
Okay.
I'm going to give you
All right.
30 seconds of just
Is-
listening.
Is everyone able to see the whiteboard at this time or no?
We are.
Okay.
But I'm just going to play it live from my computer and you can hear it, okay?
Okay.
I was born. Innocent.
Can you hear it?
Oh, just like the river I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know change is gonna come. Oh, yes, it will.
All right, that's it. Violin and singing. That's what I wanted to share.
Thank you. It looks like we can't, it seems like folks who are attending cannot see the whiteboard. So we'll just, you can describe the art that you shared, please. So we'll move to Dr.
Yeah,
Costa,
let me see.
Karen. We'll see if we can figure out the technical stuff. Sorry
Yeah,
about that, folks.
Well, you're going to have to just trust my description of the artwork when I tell you the paper mache mask is the most brilliant childhood artistic creation that at least that I've ever had the pleasure of engaging with. So I shared a picture of a paper mache mask that my toddler and I made together. And I love the mask. It was like a really a fun experience to share, and turned into a really wonderful homemade Halloween costume, which was special in its own way. But for me, um, as I'll share throughout our time together today, for me, arts-based research and creative arts and expression, I really find myself really drawn to process and the experience of creating art rather than the product that is created or the um, um, impact of the product, but rather the impact of the experience of doing and of being with art. And for me, the creation of this work with my kiddo was an experience in that. It reminded me of my own creative and artistic experiences as a child playing with paper mache and just really diving into my creativity without an end product in mind, without a particular goal in mind. That the artistic process was often inspired. Perhaps it was an experience, or I saw or heard something or felt something that really inspired the art, but there wasn't so much of a plan as to what it would end up looking like. And I really felt that for me, and I think for my kiddo, there's no other way to do art with a with a toddler than let's see where this ends up. And there was something really freeing about doing that with her, and experiencing that freedom to be in creativity, and for creativity to be something that invites closeness and relationship. And I was really grateful for that experience, and grateful for the reminder of the power that art has to be an expression of joy, and an expression of sort of present moment being. So thank you.
Thank you. That's so beautiful. Dr. Dunbar.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. And it's been so wonderful to hear other folks' stories of art and connectivity. So I picked the experience of my adolescence being a really transformative experience for me. So I lived and grew up mostly in a place called Lowell, Massachusetts, which is a post-industrial town in New England where, you know, it was a place where you didn't have that much to do. And so when I was growing up, a bunch of college students moved in and helped basically usher in this like DIY revolution, I guess, intergenerational, collaborative, rambunctious space for us, and I got to be a part of it. And so my artifacts, and I actually brought a couple because I can't believe that I still have them, but I worked on a DIY zine called Outlet as a high school student, and we self-published. And for me, art was about making anything possible. If you wanted to share a poem about your ex and you wanted it published, you could do that. If you wanted to sing a song, because my friends at the time ran an open mic night, and so it was people of all ages coming together to share, the cringiest things, right? Which is like adolescent emotions and coming of age stories, and becoming folks of all ages and spaces and experiences coming together. And I think through an experience of just um, trying, and it wasn't all beautiful, but it was all ours. It really made me appreciate the process. I think, as Dr. Crossgrove was saying, and also reminds me that art is really, yeah, about connection. And then I think in my later years now, as I'm sort of thinking about art, I'm really thinking about refining and uh, revision, and using those tools to really think about how do I grow from the thing, as opposed to sort of the frenetic feeling of just making, but how do we make it more interesting? How do we make those connections more explicit? How do we change the ways we think about a project or a product? So I think for me, art is always been about that connection of like the intangible, putting it into words or feeling, and having it be really tactile and connective.
Thank you, Dr. Dunbar. I love all this already. And I'll share that I included a picture of my kiddo holding a monster they made out of construction paper. It's a green monster with multiple wiggly eyes and, feathers and different colored arms coming off of the construction paper. And the reason why I share this is because I love the inspiration and freedom that children have to create. And we haven't yet socialized that out of them, where you give them materials and they create. And it's the coolest thing. And for me, something I try and bring into my practice is, if we can all just for a moment shake off the things that are, like our responsibilities, our to-do lists, or our worry over the state of the world, there is some healing, there is some moment of joy and pause in the act of creating with freedom. And so my kids are always an inspiration, and a reminder for me to do that regularly. So I think we're going to be able to share them with you a little bit later on, but we'll move into the first question, which is, you did a little bit of this in talking about your artifacts, but we'd like to know a little bit more about who you are and how you integrate arts-based research into your work and your projects, pedagogy and practice. And we'll start. I'm going here alphabetically so far, so we'll just keep with that. Dr. Alvarez, can you please start?
Yes. Thanks everybody. It's just lovely to be here with all of you, brilliant people. I like to use art in my practice as much as possible, whether that means my teaching, my research, my community work. I'm thrilled. I think this is year 3 for me being able to teach an art-based research class to our MSW students at Portland State Research, which I co-developed with a student at the time who was really seeking that art connection in our social work training program, which I just loved. And since then, it's morphed to this really, really beautiful sort of experiential experiment on art-based research for social change. So really thinking about how art and action can be kind of melded together beautifully in our social work mind and practice. And I guess maybe one thing I'll add is that critical feminisms and sort of that lens of of theory always informs how I'm practicing and thinking about art in the research practice. Specifically, I use performance, monologue, poetry. I use theater of the oppressed. I use photographs and text messages. I use some drawing and animation, and some cultural practices in my research and in my pedagogy. So that's how I'm trying to weave in art and arts practices. How about you, Darren?
Yeah, again, thank you so much for the space and opportunity to be here with all of you and to be in community with all of you. Certainly your work, and I'm looking at the folks who are attending, like, are just such scholarly and community engaged and academic inspiration. So I am really excited to be with you all. So yeah, I came to academia, I came to social work, and I came to arts-based work, all from sort of the same um, moment or same experience in my adolescence, and that was that I um, happened upon an opportunity where I joined um, a queer feminist sex education peer education program that did like peer outreach and peer health education, and used community engaged theater and these creative processes, both to deepen our understanding of the topics we were educating our peers about, but then also having these really amazing intergroup experiences and processes that we went through that were, looking back, I would say, sort of liberating and affirming of our own experiences. And I actually had the opportunity then to continue in that work professionally, for quite a long time. And looking back, we were doing, informally, a lot of the types of activities, or at least taking sort of the theoretical approaches that underline a lot of participatory action research. So seeking input from those who are most affected by an issue and collaborating with that knowledge to collectively construct meaning and use that to develop interventions that were most impactful for our communities, so on and so forth. And when I then entered social work and then my doctoral program, I had the opportunity to have contact with a couple of faculty members who did participatory action research. And there was this sort of connection between, oh my God, this is like what I was doing, in practice as a community-based educator, and tools that are used then to sort of continue to build knowledge in academia. And it just felt really inspiring and really exciting. So I initially started pursuing participatory action research broadly. And then I was introduced to photo voice, which was a structured version of this sort of creative team building and group kind of engagement activity my youth group used. And so I really fell in love with photo voice, and I've used photo voice in my work to engage with non-binary young adults, explore issues, as was shared earlier, about identity, community connectedness, stigma navigation, all of these things. And certainly have found photo voice as a methodology to be really helpful in producing and helping generate this collaborative, shared representation of meaning around identity. And that's been really exciting to publish and to do an exhibit with and to put out into the world. But I've just been consistently moved by both the reflections on what it's like to experience those processes, what it's like to experience that collective meaning making and creative generation of creative works together in a group setting. And that was true when I was doing youth work in the community, and is very much true in what I observe in the research. And so, as I said, I've been really called to and excited by deepening an exploration into the impact of not what is produced through these methodologies as a product, but what happens as we do these methodologies. Because I think they have tremendous impact for affirming and affirming marginalized experiences and contributing to our shared liberation.
Thank you so much. Can you, for folks who may not be familiar with the method, can you just briefly describe what photo voice is and how it works? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's different versions, and people use all sorts of different approaches to this, but generally speaking, it's an arts-based approach to participatory action research. So in my work, and it's originated by scholar Wang, I think 1999 would be the citation, but I can double check and we can maybe plug that into our chat. But in essence, as a participatory method, participants are positioned as co-researchers, as collaborators who help design research questions, who help plan the research process and are involved in every step of the way, from data collection to data analysis, and oftentimes publication and presentation as well. But the data that's gathered is based upon participant researchers taking photos to respond to prompts or research questions. So rather than answering an interview question or a focus group question, taking a photo that captures the experience related to that question, and then oftentimes sharing it with the other members of the group, looking for shared themes or unique experiences represented in those photos, and then collectively sort of building shared meaning through that process.
Love it. One of my favorite methods, and also something that can be used pedagogically in the classroom too. So it's super fun. Dr. Dunbar.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've been thinking about, and particularly in the classroom, is how do we take the excitement and curiosity making spaces of art and translate that into our pedagogy. And so one of the ways that I'm trying to do that is just incorporating folks' connection to joy. And so this year in particular, I've been trying to have artifacts that we collectively create. And so things like my students have to create intervention presentations, but I want them to make them more accessible. So we're doing like one-pagers, right, which includes visual language to help convey information. And I think that as an artist, right, part of the joy of our work is taking things and translating them using different modalities and different methods. And so employing some of that in the classroom, creating things like I created a joy playlist with the students. So one thing that brings you joy, right? Or one piece of music that brings you joy. And then we have a collective joy experience that they can just take and do whatever they want with it. But it's something that connects us to the time we've had together and offers folks the opportunity to share a little bit of themselves and disclose about who they are outside of, journal reflections or papers. Other things that I was thinking about is some of the work that I did previously. So I always say that I learned how to be a scholar by just asking people to help me. So one of the ways was just, how do I do this thing? And I asked people all the time, like, well, how did you do it? How do I do it? And getting really thoughtful mentorship in that way. So I think when I think about art in particular, I think about nobody is good at it right away, and the expectation that you're supposed to be like a master, right, of these skills and tools is something that we've created really unrealistic expectations for ourselves and across the board. And so for me I think as a scholar, I really care about refining and reflecting and using the practice of just doing it alone, or like really doing things over and over and over, the repetition and practice of it, so that you get good, so that you have something you feel really proud of sharing. And I will say that is sort of counter to the person that I was, which was, throw the piece together and print it, right? And that was sort of that DIY spirit of we're just going to do it anyway, which I think is really amazing and wonderful and creative. But I also find that as I think about my role as someone who shares things in the world, I want to think about why I'm sharing them and like what is the purpose and how do we do it sustainably. And so I think my practice has been more sort of connected to the work of, say, like Kiesi Lehman, who is a writer and artist who talks a lot about revision and how you spending time to reflect on the things that you put out in the world and then saying, oh, I want to do it over or want to do it different. That has made me, I think, a much better and more thoughtful educator and scholar and artist overall. So those are my initial thoughts.
Thank you so much. That also to me comes up as like an antidote to that like hyper perfectionism that we can often have as scholars, and just the playfulness and the joy. And I love this idea of refine, revise, play, refine, revise, practice. It's I mean, a different kind of rigor, right? A joyful rigor. Okay, so moving on to the next question. What are impacts of using arts-based research that you have documented or observed in your projects? What have you seen come up for people? And we'll start Dr. Alvarez again.
I love thinking about impacts in a lot of different ways. One of the things that has been really amazing to see. We started a project a couple years ago, right before the pandemic, of course. I was funded to do a project with community partners in the Philippines. And we spent a lot of time dreaming up the ways that art could be imbued into all the aspects of the research, right? So what it meant was even thinking about the research design, even thinking about how our community partners and research team were going to interact together. We wanted that to be rooted in cultural and arts-based methods and understanding. So we looked at a couple, the project was about food sovereignty and seeds and plants. And so we looked at some of the native and endemic plants and that are relevant and culturally important to us in the Philippines, and made our project cycle based on one of the life cycles of one of those plants. And we drew that out, and we talked about the different ways that like the harvesting would be the focus groups, and the thrashing would be discussions that we were having with each other, and planting would be finding ways to support new people to learn about the work. And then it went around again in a circle, right? So I loved the ways that it made it more accessible to people we were working with farmers, we were working with anthropologists. So we really wanted to think about how do we talk about research in a meaningful and different way, centering different epistemologies, right? Centering epistemologies that we know and love because we eat them and we work outside and think about them in that way. So the impact of that was really exciting. People took more ownership, I think, of the project. We also, during the focus group sessions, I used the poetic analysis. So I was writing poems from the focus groups and sharing it back with people and asking participants for feedback. And it's incredible, Ramona, we've done that before in community, and it's incredible the ways that people treat that as a gift, right? Like it's actually just a mirroring, right? It's an offering of a reflection of a witnessing process. But people receive it as a gift, partially because it's nice to be listened to, right? And it demonstrates some sort of careful listening, ceremonial listening, right? So being able to offer that and also see how that changes people's perspectives has just been wonderful. And I guess the last thing I'll say is that it's also, we've been talking about the importance of the process of art. That's true. The product is really amazing also. And last year, one of my students created an animated story of our project, right? And they drew the entire project and tell the story of it after interviewing all of us on the research team. And I'll share the link. It's phenomenal. It's this 10-minute animated story of our research project that is absolutely gorgeous. And again, was so meaningful to share in community, right? It's so meaningful to share back with our partners and say, look at what we're learning, look at how we're thinking, look at what we were all doing together. So I think I'll leave it at that but to me, the impacts are so broad and so wide reaching and range from just like feeling differently about the work to really thinking differently about the work to really doing the work differently.
I love that. Please do share that.
Okay. Yeah, I will.
That sounds amazing. Dr. Cosgrove.
Yeah, excellent. So yeah, I'll talk a little bit about some documented observations that are in one of the articles that was shared in the chat. First, I think it's important to recognize that there's lots of evidence in the literature about the emotional and psychological benefits to creativity and engagement in the arts. So like this contributes to well-being. And I think particularly with the emphasis on things not needing to be perfect, right? So going back to the comment shared earlier that like that if we can move away from the emphasis on sort of perfection or a sense of things need to be a certain way to be of creative value, that engagement in creative endeavors is of benefit in and of itself. I think it can invite a space for playfulness that oftentimes, perhaps we as academics and scholars don't always have a lot of space for. So I think there's some benefit for us doing this as well. But certainly, when I use arts-based methods with non-binary folks and or queer folks more broadly, the ability to be playful in the face of marginalization and a lot of the topics that come up that participant co-researchers in my projects tend to want to focus on are challenging experiences, experiences of identity erasure or microaggressions or outright, what I think we could call policy violence, right? That being able to find playfulness and creativity in those moments is nourishing, is perhaps even healing, but that additionally. So certainly, I think this is echoed throughout the literature, but just speaking about my experience in the projects that I've done, is this real recognition of the shared creative process, right? So the way that I've done Photo Voice has been in group-based settings, that there are people sharing their photos and dialogue with each other, co-constructing meaning together. That is a tool for pure connectedness, and it's a tool for increasing sort of visibility and affirmation. If somebody is having the opportunity to creatively articulate or express a gender-related experience they've had, and their gender tends to be a gender that is, again, erased, made invisible, misinterpreted or stigmatized, the joyful creation and creative expression of one's identity in and of itself can be a really affirming element of identity celebration. And to do that with other people, particularly if you are somebody who has experienced the isolation, that cis normativity or sort of binaristic assumptions produce, that connectedness to other people through creativity, that collaborative engagement is in and of itself just an incredible experience that repeatedly, with different groups in the literature, but certainly within my own work, that non-binary young people are finding a lot of meaning in. And then lastly, I would just reflect on one of the Photo Voice projects I did where participant researchers were talking about the absence of gender role models of gender role models that, when they were perhaps a high school or middle school student and exploring identity or trying to make sense of their experience as a non-binary person, and not having the language to name those experiences, but also not having role models to look up to as sort of not only representations of being like healthy, happy, queer, or non-binary people in the world, but like representations of like how I can do my gender, like that this creative, expressive way of exploring identity is also a tool in becoming the role model you never had, both for yourself and for future generations. And that just feels incredibly important to me.
So good. And that, I mean, those findings align with some of our findings from our project. And how powerful it is just to hear that even here. So passing it over to Dr. Dunbar.
Yeah, really nicely with experiences of working with the Osama project, where we had people talk about their experiences of getting a chance to share their stories, right? A feeling seen, of getting the opportunity to connect these things that have been sort of disparate experiences that they've shared either alone or in their families to other people. And then in particular, getting a chance to be witnessed by other people, especially strangers, and how powerful that is. Um, yeah, I also was thinking a lot about the space of outside of the academy. I think in particular, as someone who had, I feel like had to do a lot of backpedaling. I like to call them side quests, a lot of side quests to get into a truly, like, I think, understand my role of what does it mean to be an academic and what does it mean to be a scholar. I did a lot of just random things. And so some of the things that I think were helpful in terms of developing my scholarship and understanding my role as a researcher was just doing events that connected the research to people's lived experiences. So hosting workshops, connecting folks with art installations, that kind of stuff, of taking what we were experiencing and doing as scholars and really making it accessible and intentionally uh, understand, and then also interactive. So at one point in time, I lived in Chicago, which is America's best food city, in my humble opinion. You can fight me on it, but one of the things that I got to do was do a lot of work with just other artists and folks who were trying to help people make meaningful connections and understand these like sort of larger social constructs like race. And so we hosted like a 3-day symposium that was just run on basically coffee and goodwill, where we had, people come and do workshops from like the Center for the Healing of Racism. We hosted a like art event and music event to help people connect the understanding of race as a social construct, right? But also as an embodied and like systemic experience. And then we hosted a film screening. And that those 3 days really, I think, bridged the gap of understanding, right? Like critical race theory, understanding like Black feminism, understanding these sort of larger constructs and concepts, and putting it in a way that lay people who may not have necessarily the tools in the moment to do a deep study on some of these concepts, a space to really interrogate their own understandings of race, right? Their own experiences of disconnection, navigating guilt and shame and all of these things. And it's not in the classroom. So, as all of us who have been in classrooms where these experiences get right enacted and activated, it was a space of peers. And so I think some of that, some of those experiences in my past of really getting folks to sit down and or even just feel less tense about these concepts, especially when it comes to race, especially when it comes to like hegemony and, and colonialism, right? Offering of folks a way of of entry that was a low barrier. I think has really helped me in my scholarship to then when I'm doing work with Black immigrants and we're talking about migration experiences, there's room to think about, well, what are the like dark assumptions that you have about the community that you are now a part of, right? How do you navigate your own experiences of guilt or shame or even just like anger that you're here, right? That your displacement is like not a net positive, right? I think some of the narratives that we get we get told about benevolence and the goodness of America in relationship to people's like migrating or living here as immigrants. And so I think for me, uh, a lot of my work in my role is really helping folks make space to engage in the discomfort of the stories we tell ourselves, and then in contrast to the meta narratives that we're being told we have to accept or engage in, because that's just kind of how we've been socialized to accept like these sort of dominant right narratives of what is okay, and those counter narratives and counter experiences offer people respite and a sense of peace and even just a sense of vindication that they deserve to have rage or fear or uncertainty about their lives. So that's kind of where uh the lessons of this moment are taking me and my particular experiences over the last few years in my research.
Oh my gosh, so good. All of this is so deep. I love the kind of tapestry that's being created. If it's okay, I'd like to share a little bit of an experience that Antonia and I actually had. So one of the articles you've received a link to in the chat, it's I See Myself Strong. And we wanted to write this paper because we'd read a lot about poetic inquiry and poetic analysis, and seen the outcomes of those things, but we hadn't really seen a description of how you do that. And so we really wanted to, make a template for people to show folks this is how you can do expressive poetic analysis using the stories from your community members. And this particular project was an HIV prevention curriculum with Indigenous youth, urban Indigenous youth. And it was very small. It was ultimately 23, stayed through the whole protocol, but there was a subsample of Two-Spirit LGBTQ young folks. And it was an N of 5. And we thought, and the community thought, these are still, even with the small n, really important stories that need to be told. And I think some of the most beautiful reflections about the roles that they play in their community for themselves, being the role models, being the elders that they seek, is really powerful. But we had a tough time finding a home for this particular paper. And I'll share two of the critiques. I'm gonna shout out to all the reviewers who challenged us. You helped us make it better. And it eventually did find a home. But the big, things that they said was, one, that the data was too old. So we had published so the curriculum had finished in 2015. And then we were coming back to these stories in 2020, right? When things were really starting to happen and policies were coming out, the legacy of the policies that have targeted our LGBTQ Two-Spirit communities. And so we were like, this needs to be revisited. So that was one critique, too old of data. And the second critique was the N is too small. It doesn't give us anything. And so multiple revisions until we could find a home, and I think reviewers who understood what we were trying to do. But ultimately, we took this paper and the poems back to the community, we had worked with. and we shared food and we sat around the table and we shared the poems with them. And we actually had each of them read the poems out loud. And, you know, there were tears and there was expressions of gratitude. And, you know, one young person said, "Thank you for doing this. I need this and I still need this. I continue to need this," which pushes back against that, "Oh, your data's too old." You know, like some of these things like transcend our rigid expectations of when data is stale, right? That some of these identity based experiences really are persistent. And they said, "Thank you for doing this. Thank you for sharing this." And one person actually wrote a poem while we were reading the poems and then said, "I would like you to put this poem into that article," which we did. And that for me was like the reminder that we do our best in academia, and thank goodness for all of our peer reviewers and our colleagues. And sometimes community knows better than we do. And so I think that in terms of research is one thing, you know, just to consider in terms of impact. Thanks for letting me share that story. So yeah, and I will say I was like ready to give up on that paper. And it was Antonia who was like, "No, there's something here. We can do this." And it was actually taking it to the community, because I said, should we move this forward? And they said, "Please keep going." So all right, so moving on to our final question, and then we'll do our activity together. What is your imagining for how arts-based research can help us through times of exclusion and targeted suppression of knowledge? What's the future hold? Dr. Alvarez.
We have such a legacy of world builders to learn from. You know, we have Octavia Butler and Gloria Anzaldúa and Bell Hooks, and in particular these women of color, and have reminded us the ways that we can dream the world that we need to, and especially in these very challenging moments. And I think the ways that I've seen arts-based research really respond to that or give us breath in those moments are when our communities, our people are so used to experiencing research that is extractive and harmful and like draws upon these historical and ongoing harms over and over again, right? These capitalist and colonial procedures that are embedded in our research. And the minute that can shift and research can become relational and ethical and responsible and rigorous and reciprocal, that to me opens up this whole new world, right? For one, it opens up a world of researchers who never thought we would use the word research in our lives, including myself, right? Like, I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to work in community. I didn't want anything to do with social work or social work research. And I think that's a decision we get to make every day. But finding a new way to think about research is something that I thought was invigorating and holding me is that's world building to me, right? That's future building. And then there's like really specific ways. Like, I was at the Oregon Suicide Prevention Conference last week presenting our work, and it's a queer suicide prevention project, and a bunch of the projects were arts-based, and we created arts-based findings. So we have like images of our data on the back, and the front says "Queer Joy is Suicide Prevention." And we made t-shirts and presented with our community partners at the conference. And right, even these small moments where people are like looking at data on a t-shirt and being like, "That's beautiful. I want to know more. I want to see more." I know that's world building, and especially for queer youth out there right now in this time, it's so important for us to be sharing stories of futures right? And then another moment that just felt really particular was in the middle of the pandemic, and a lot of the women of color scholars that I was communicating with, we were all feeling a particular kind of isolation. We were all feeling a particular kind of labor being placed on us to manage things in our lives, in our homes, in our institutions, just around the world. And we engaged a little collective of us over here in the PNW engaged in a like letter writing world building moment to each other, and we produced this beautiful paper that I'll share, and it was writing letters to ourselves, to our former selves, to our future selves. Some of us wrote to like our kids. Some of us wrote to academians who were trying to stop us. We did all kinds of things, and it was totally affirming. It was seeing each other. It was seeing each other in the space. And again, it was one of those moments where I really know that the arts-based research helped us through this very particular time in these very particular identity categories, and also it's helping us see a way forward. So so many things.
I love it. Thank you so much. So just a moment here, I just want to call attention to it's 1:05, and just want to make sure that we leave a little bit of time so we can do our interactive activity. This is our final question, but just wanted to give you the heads up there.
Well, I'm going to keep it a bit shorter, at least try to, because keeping it brief is not a skill I am known for. But I think, much of what I would say to answer this, I think, has been sort of implied both in previous answers and certainly what was just shared. The value of joy, and joy as a tool of both celebration and resistance, I think speaks to my heart and speaks deeply to the work I care about engaging in. But I will just, offer that in addition to the joy in the community building that feels necessary always, but feels particularly necessary when people's identities, lives, right to exist are really being targeted, that joy just I feel like can't be overstated. But I think that a current piece that really stands out to me is I'm thinking of one particular example, but there are many. But I was watching the news, which carries a whole host of sort of raising concerns and fears and all of this. But I was watching a particular evening, and trans rights were being debated, and an elected official routinely was using an anti-trans slur on the floor of the Capitol. And I spent some time thinking, what would it feel like if I was like a teenager watching this? If I was a trans teenager right now, what would this feel like for me, right? And I think we can probably imagine what that answer would be, maybe personally, or at least extend some empathy to imagine what that would be like. And so I think for me, arts-based research is also a way to reclaim who gets to tell the story, who gets to tell our story, or who gets to tell the story of the community. And right now, there are harmful, inaccurate, misrepresenting, and violent stories being told about many communities. And I think finding ways to support community members, people with lived experiences, people navigating this particular time, finding ways to celebrate and amplify opportunities for people to tell their own stories about their communities, and to do so with creativity and joy. Feels like a necessary tool, and also I think drawing back, to the lessons learned from Black feminists and Black queer feminists is just the idea that marginalized people experiencing joy and taking care of self and one another is a tool of resistance, and is, I think, what will sustain us.
Thank you. Dr. Dunbar.
Made me very emotional. So thank you both for your pieces. I think for me, I tend to love like speculative work, so sci-fi, fantasy, and I think who else can better usher us into a future of unknowns rather than the people who have survived, right? Which are the folks who have been forced to endure things like fascism always, things like, right, erasure always. And so for me, I think about the fact that in the US, like the idea of technology is sort of relegated to mostly like white tech bros, but we as like people of color and people with marginalized experiences and like not just marginalized but exploited, extracted, right, like intentionally oppressed experiences, um have had to develop our own tools of technology forever. And so I always return to the work of people who can help me make sense of the technologies that we need to survive this moment. So I sent Bridget a whole list of things that I'm currently reading. So I'm currently like studying Rashida Phillips' work around time and temporality, and she talks a lot about time poverty as a thing that we are experiencing under capitalism, and this idea of how do we make time, right? And move ourselves away from a sort of like labor intensive, right? Using our time to produce for other people. I think it's a really impactful reframing for me. I also think focusing on possibilities and time travel. Like I always say, like immigrants are the best for thinking about time travel because we do it, right? We move from one part of in a collective experiences to being strangers in a strange land, right? And then you have to navigate these whole experiences. So I am personally hoping for us as folks who have to do the dirty work of repairing the harms that people who have all of the time and access and resources continuously waste. We get to do that together with joy and with intention. But I also think like we really do have to take care of ourselves and each other. And so I think Ramona, you said arts is a hope story, and I think that that's it, right? Like we have to help create these hope stories that are gonna transcend these moments that feel untenable and really existentially violent for us.
Thank you all so much. So I feel moved to share the poem that I wrote after coming back from the boarding school healing summit, which is in the editorial. And the way that I created this is I was just taking notes throughout the summit, and some were verbatim, some were like felt sense, descriptive words. And so what I did was I just created a poem of those notes using a method I call poetic witnessing. So I use the verbatim quotes coupled with interpretive abstractions, and represent as a representation of collective, a collection of voices. And that last question in particular was about futurisms. And for me, this poem reflects how futurism was embedded in all of the stories that I heard. Because, well, as you'll see, it's called We Leave Something Beautiful. And then after this, we'll transition to our other activity together. So this moment, the healing power of telling the story, the power of truth telling. You can't have healing if you don't hear the story, but in a safe place with relatives who hold you when you fall apart and build you back whole. The body tells the story if you can't tell it yourself. Through illness, mental health, relationships suffer, broken traditions and broken bones. But breaking is not erasing. We stitch our broken parts with gold dust. We become something cracked but shimmering. We leave something good and beautiful. There was this aha moment I found in a concept, historical trauma. It was the missing piece, proof of something I've always known, freedom to call it something not my name. Now I listen to my body. When I have a grievance with myself, I say it out loud, bring people in. Art saved me. It saves me. I'm still healing, reclaiming a word, one word at a time. Healing is a verb, a journey, not a final destination. We leave something beautiful for those who come after us. There was always resistance, resistors, even though they were teaching us to be good prisoners. But there was the art, the music, the laughter, the sunrise. They see me. I am not forgotten. I am enough. To someone, I am everything. Oh, and today we are leaving something beautiful. We are still here. We belong. We belong everywhere. We will look into the eyes of our children. They are all our children. And we will say, we wish you joy and pleasure. We wish you play. We bring the ocean to you, the waves like our breath reminding you of home. Here, we speak to the heart, to the spirit. Say it out loud. I am beautiful. Say it out loud. We are beautiful. We are beautiful. I didn't realize I'd get a little emotional, but thank you for indulging me in that. Can we switch over to showing the visual representations of the artifacts?
Yes, 1 minute.
Thank you. And we invite you to jump into the Q&A if you like. What we wanted to do here was go through a meaning-making activity together as a community. So now seeing these images on the screen, along with hearing our stories, our poems, our experiences, what do you see here? Maybe you can put a feeling word, you can put a couple descriptive words, you can ask questions. What might be the themes that emerge from this gathering today, based on all you've heard and what you see here? And if we, let's see, yep, put responses in the Q&A. Oh, there it is. So I'll invite also our panelists to maybe come up with some themes or ideas or reflections. What do we see here?
I think what's coming up for me, and it actually was coming up as you were finishing the poem, but I think it connects to what we've been talking about. What the idea, the image that stuck with me with your poem was that we bring the ocean to you. And I've been thinking about Gaza, and I've been thinking about the kids along the Gaza Strip, and the ocean is right there, right? Right next to the genocide is the ocean. And there's something really powerful about that imagery for me, especially as I've received so much training in Hawaii from community thinking about what ocean means. And it's like freedom, and it's breath, and it's a mother place for me. It's also a dying place, a killing place, a very, very risky place, right? So for me, I love just this imagery of like bringing the ocean to you, which means bringing the pain and bringing the space for joy and bringing the space for connectivity and wholeness. I just keep picturing Gaza. I think of the ocean and the genocide, and I think that those two things are coexisting at the same moment in the same place. And maybe that speaks to me of time travel, Zine, and thinking about the ways that like these art spaces create new spaces, or remind us of old spaces that we've been to, in some other place in our heart. So that just like felt really vivid to me as you were talking. And I think I'll just add that abolition, like thinking about abolition in our arts practices and our social work practices, all feels really connected to the ideas that arts are resistance and always have been.
Yes, thank you. And I see a question here or a comment here. Continuous comes to mind. I love that. I love that. So the ocean, simultaneous coexistence of pain, loss, and beauty and breath. Continuous.
I'm gonna say something that really and it's and you said be in creativity. And I think that that's what I'm thinking of when I see all of these pieces together, because they're all we're all in creativity. So it's like the process, it's like the finished product, but it's a conversation. And I think that that's what I'm holding on to. So thank you.
Thank you. Love that. Being in creativity, continuity, the ocean. What else? I see joy. I see play.
Yeah, I was gonna just note that I think, as sharing these works as a response to like thinking about a moment where art moved us or felt particularly significant in our lives, also as an opportunity for us to tell stories about significant moments in our lives. Right. And so I think like we've got artwork made by children that are near and dear to us. We have um, the screenshot of a music performance that like reflects this particular moment that was of significance, or seeing your experience of like this sort of DIY self-published work, like capturing this moment in time of real sort of significance or like really important meaning. So I think like to me, it's just in addition to themes that might exist across the pieces, is the joy and just recognizing the way in which art can sort of capture and reflect significant moments. And all different, right? Like we could each tell a very different story about why that was significant, and we might see themes across what constitutes as significant in the lives of academics doing work with marginalized communities or whatever the case, shared experiences we might have. But I think that for those of us, anybody who's interested in diving into arts-based work, I think that that's a really fruitful opportunity that like this method produces. There's just sort of endless meaning and endless opportunity, and can get really meta really quick.
I love it. And let's see, for Jocelyn, healing, connection, and creativity. For Samantha, experimentation. For other, Samantha G, hands and tenderness. Well, it's so nice to see you all participating. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your contributions to this. Yeah, I love seeing my baby's little brown hands. They're so cute.
I think hands, like you see hands and faces, and I think that's really interesting too, to see all the hands and faces.
Mm,
And
yeah.
especially as we're thinking about like making and telling. Yeah.
Yeah, making, telling, hands and tenderness.
I would add maybe the word, I don't know if this showed up in the chat, but like building, and certainly not universally applicable, but the idea of like hands as tools of the body that can help build, and like both the presence of hand and the presence of like constructing something.
Yes. Building.
Intention too. There's a lot of intention there.
Yeah. I love it. Here's what I've written down so far. Continuous healing, connection, creativity, experimentation, capturing a moment, hands and tenderness, faces, building, constructing, intention. That feels right. That feels right. Yeah. So any questions from anyone here? Questions from our incredible panelists? Oh, liberation. Yes, thank you. Liberation. Continuous healing, connection, creativity, experimentation, capturing a moment, hands and tenderness, faces, constructing, building, intention, and liberation. Love it. It's so good. Thank you for creating with us today. I feel so grateful. We have a few minutes. It's 1:24. If there's any burning questions that you have or something you haven't shared that you'd like to share in the Q&A, please feel free to do so now. Also, just want to invite you to consider submitting your own poetry and creative works to Ophelia. The guidelines should be up on our website soon. We have finished drafting those, and the exciting thing that we're doing now is, in addition to poetry, we are inviting creative works, and that could be fiction, flash fiction, photography, digital art. We're just asking that these all be, original pieces, and not incorporating AI. So that's kind of our criteria. You can read more about it on the website soon. If you are not subscribed to Ophelia's kind of social media channels, please get connected with us, and we'll let you know when everything is officially up. But we're really excited about this particular moment of revitalization for these kinds of stories to be told in these kinds of ways. And we at Ophelia are so committed to bearing witness and listening and mentoring in the process. So excited. We didn't know, and we've been planning this revitalization for quite some time. We didn't know that it would coincide with this particular political moment, but I trust in some of the ways that the universe works to provide these joyful, soothing balms when we need them most. So, panelists, do you have any final words?
Just appreciative of everybody.
Same. Yeah. Thanks everybody for being here and sharing space.
And thank you all for thoughtful words and reflections. I'm gonna have to go and squirrel away and do some reflection myself after this. So wonderful.
So good. All right. Well, appreciate everyone, and another gratitude. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you, panelists, colleagues, community. Thank you for doing the work that you do and being who you are in this world. It means so much. I'm grateful to know you all. Thank you, Yoselin.